Hello and welcome to a new direction for our channel. About 2 to 3 years ago, I started to gain a much deeper appreciation and stronger interest for movies, and as such, I like to discuss movies I greatly enjoy. Make no mistake, however, the retrospectives aren't going anywhere. It's more that my content would be just a bit more varied going forward. Anyhow, the movie I would like to bring to light is the phenomenal 1948 film directed by John Huston, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. In this film, we initially follow Dobbs, who is an American living in post-revolutionary Mexico in the early 1920s. Dobbs lives not even paycheck to paycheck, but meal to meal. He begs to wealthy-looking people to get some quick money, but one time he is instead roped into a job to set up an oil rig by one of these people he's begging money from. Together with Curtin, another American he met in a park who's living meal to meal like him, they work 16 to 18 hours a day and don't get paid on the spot. Their employer assures them that he will give them the money once his contractors pays him back in town. When they return, their employer leaves to get the money and tells the two to meet him at a nearby bar, but he never shows up. Defeated, Dobbs and Curtin head into an inn for the night where they hear grand tales of gold from an old prospector named Howard. They find the story interesting but don't dwell on it any further until the next day, where Dobbs and Curtin sitting in a park contemplating on what to do. They drop the subject as Curtin sees their employer to run away with their hard-earned money. They confront him and are invited to talk it through over a few drinks. Things get heated and a fight breaks out. Eventually, Dobbs and Curtin overpowers him and they take the money they are owed and not $1 more. With their newfound wealth, they come up with the idea to ask Howard if he's willing to go on another prospecting expedition with them, and he agrees. On their journey to find the perfect spot for gold, they face different obstacles such as their train being attacked by bandits and Dobbs and Curtin not being too fit for such a harsh journey. But eventually they reach their goal. This is only the start of their worries, however, as the power of gold and the greed it brings out in people, on top of their isolation from society, starts to creep in. That's a very brief description of the first third of the film or so. Before I go into further detail, I highly encourage anyone that found what I said so far to be of interest to see the movie for themselves and then come back here. I suppose you could call this a spoiler warning, although not really. For a proper understanding of our de facto protagonist, Dobbs, and to explore the title of the video, we need to go back. All the way back to the opening shot, as a matter of fact. Here, Dobbs is seeing if he's won the lottery, which he didn't. I believe this was chosen as the first shot to give the viewer an insight into what Dobbs wants. Easy money and lots of it. This can be seen further by his other actions. He relentlessly begs to anyone who's American and looks well off. First a guy with better looking clothes than him, and then another man in a white suit. The man in the white suit gives him money, as Dobbs says it's for a meal. To his credit here, he does in fact buy food for the money, but also another lottery ticket. But yet again in his defense, it's due to the boy selling it is relentless and Dobbs gives in to make him go away. In the next scene, Dobbs meets Curtin for the first time, where he hands him a cigarette, showing that Dobbs is empathetic towards people in the same situation as him. Also in the same scene, however, he finds the man wearing a white suit again and asks for more money for another meal. He gets it, but instead he pays for a haircut. Immediately afterward, Dobbs finds the man again to beg for more money. He's hoping to trick him into believing that he's another person as he's all cleaned up now. This is to avoid suspicion that he's asked the same person 3 times in one day. Unbeknownst to Dobbs, however, the man in a white suit took a more thorough look at him in their last encounter and recognizes him even after he's gotten cleaned up. He's still somewhat sympathetic in a sense, but gives Dobbs an extra peso as a way for him to remember that the man wants nothing further to do with him. Later that night, Dobbs is begging another American for money with the same excuse. Instead, he's offered a job to set up an oil rig as one of his workers didn't show up. It's hard work, but supposedly pays well. $8 a day, or roughly $145 a day counting for inflation. Though, this is not as good as it sounds, however. When he goes through with it, he's working 16 to 18 hours a day, and is incentivized to work faster and harder by a supposed bonus they're getting once they're done. Assuming 18 hours a day, he's working all day for $8 an hour in 2025. So basically, he's working like a modern American, except it was back in the good old day apparently, in the 1920s. Tangent aside, on returning to town, their employer says that he will go and get his pay, and then in turn return with theirs. Dobbs insists that a few of them go with him to ensure that they get what they're owed. Instead, their employer gives money to Dobbs and Curtin and says that he'll meet them at the local bar no later than 3 p.m. Needless to say, he doesn't show up. It's in this bar that they learn their employer, a man by the name of Pat McComrick, is well known in town as a swindler. He employs people that are from out of town and in dire need of a job and then vanishes once the work is done. Defeated, Dobbs and Curtin go to a cheap inn called the The Black Bear, yes, that's it, of course. Here they meet an old prospector named Howard who tells tales of his younger days digging for gold. Dobbs and Curtin are interested in what Howard has to say. Howard mentions how people become obsessed with gold and always try to take more than they set out to get. First, they might get gold worth $20,000, but then they increase it to $30,000 and $50,000 and so on, never satisfying their need for gold. Dobbs says how he wouldn't do that. He would be happy to get $25,000 and scoot on out of there.
It wouldn't be that way with me. I swear it wouldn't. I take only what I set out to get, even if there's still $500,000 worth lying around waiting to be picked up.
Dobbs dwells on this matter further the next day. He thinks that gold can be as much of a blessing as a curse. It doesn't do any harm as long as the one who finds it is, quote, the right guy, end quote. That is to say, people can still be civil around gold if it's a virtuous enough individual who finds it. Which is also to say that Dobbs thinks he's one of them, given that he stated yesterday that he will take the amount he sent out to get and then leave. The conversation is interrupted as Curtin spots Pat McCormick and the two confront him about their money. McCormick invites them to discuss it over a drink, but soon starts a fight with them over the money. Dobbs and Curtin overpowers him and, interestingly, Dobbs is the one who takes the money and only what they are owed, throwing the rest in McCormick's face. It's possible that he does this to save face in front of Curtin, or he can't do something that he deems immoral, such as stealing. Regardless of his true intentions, Dobbs and Curtin decide to invest their money and give prospecting a try. They invite Howard as he's a lot more experienced than they are and showed interest in prospecting from his story the day before. Howard gladly accepts, but after running the numbers of the money they have between the three of them, they don't have enough. They're missing $100 for a proper expedition. This is when the boy from earlier who sold the lottery ticket enters the picture again, and it turns out that Dobbs won the remaining $100 that were missing for their expedition. He doesn't mind putting in extra in Curtin's place, who has now invested the least out of the three, saying that if they don't find anything, what he puts in and what Curtin puts in won't make a difference afterwards, as the both of them would end up where they started. Howard stares at the two with a blank or gloomy expression before they head out. I'm not really sure what to make of this. Perhaps he can judge their character well enough and knows that one of them will be overtaken by greed. If so, he most likely goes in with the hopes that the person will be taken by the harsh environment, or that his side, so to speak, has a numbers advantage. Okay, so before going further, let's recap Dobbs' character up to the point that their expedition starts. You can tell he has a greedy side to him in the way he begs, especially when he gets cleaned up only in an attempt to swindle money out of someone, and that he daydreams about riches such as gold and fully expects that he can resist his temptation without issue. But right now, he also has a gentler side to him, seen by the way he gave cigarettes to Curtin, that he takes what he is owed and doesn't steal money from McCormick, and that he's willing to essentially pay for Curtin's missing investment money in their prospecting expedition. So for now, Dobbs doesn't seem too bad of a person. He's a guy in a desperate situation, and sometimes he crosses questionable boundaries to survive, but for the most part he seems like an overall good man. The movie takes a turn for a while, more so focusing on their journey to find a gold deposit. On the way, they're ambushed by bandits while in a train, and afterwards reach a town where they buy supplies they need for the expedition. Dobbs and Curtin are astonished by Howard's resilience. They were expecting to have to carry him as he's an old man.
Remember what you said back in Tampico about having to pack that old man on our backs?
That was when I took him for an ordinary human being, not part goat. Look at him climb, will you?
What gets me is how he can go all day long in the sun without any water.
Maybe he's part camel, too.
After weeks seeking out a deposit, Dobbs gives up and says that they should go back to civilization.
You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking we ought to give up. Leave the whole outfit. Everything behind and go back to civilization.
Howard, however, insults him for being weak, and Dobbs' first response is anger and threats to kill him. Curtin has to hold Dobbs back, but Howard continues, calling them dumbasses for not being able to see the gold they are literally stepping on.
Let me tell you something, my two fine bedfellows. You're so dumb there's nothing to compare you with. You're dumber than the dumbest jackass. Look at each other, will you? Do you ever see anything like yourself for being dumb specimens? You're so dumb, you don't even see the riches you're treading on with your own feet.
Despite literally treading on gold, Howard says the largest gold deposits are further up the mountain, which is where they will operate. They set up camp away from the mine and will use a cover-up story that they're hunters looking for hides if they encounter someone passing by while they're there. After their first day of intense labor, Dobbs brings up the idea that the three of them should split the gold between them so that everyone is responsible for their own share. There's some back and forth, but eventually it's agreed upon that they will split it and each shall hide their own share from the other two as a safety precaution. In the next scene, Dobbs is hard at work in the mine when it suddenly collapses. Curtin is nearby and notices that something is wrong. He calls out for Dobbs' name but gets no response. He realizes that it can leave Dobbs to die in the mines but stops for a moment and then the better of him gets through. Curtin gets Dobbs out of the mine, saving his life.
Who pulled me out?
Curtin did.
I owe my life to you, partner.
During the night, they discuss what they're going to spend their money on once they go back. Howard is going to open a small business and live an easier life in his old age, while Curtin is thinking of buying land to grow peaches as he has a fond childhood memory of working at such a farm. This is to say that Howard and Curtin have thought about what they want to do and why they need the gold to fulfill those wishes. Dobbs, on the other hand, has not thought about it much. What he's going to do is take a Turkish bath, buy fancy new clothes, and then go into a fancy restaurant and order everything on the menu. What he wishes for are short, hedonistic desires of what he perceives a well-off person does and wants. He's digging for gold for the sake of being rich, and not to support a lifestyle he greatly favors or to achieve any tangible goal. The conversation reaches an awkward silence. To break it, Howard brings up the idea that they should set a limit of how much gold they dig up and go back to civilization. He says that $25,000 per person should be good enough. Dobbs, however, scoffs at him and says that's small potatoes and they should get $50,000 instead. Ideally, $75,000 each. This is from the same guy that said this.
Gold's a devilish sort of a thing anyway. You start out, you tell yourself you'll be satisfied with 25,000 handsome smackers worth of it. So help my Lord and cross my heart. Fine resolution. After months of sweating yourself dizzy and growing short on provisions and finding nothing, you finally come down to 15,000, then 10. Finally you say, Lord, let me just find $5,000 worth and never ask for anything more the rest of my life.
$5,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah, here in this joint seems like a lot, but I tell you, if it was to make a real strike, you couldn't be dragged away. Not even the threat of miserable death would keep you from trying to add 10,000 more. 10, you'd want to get 25, 25, you want to get 50, 50, 100, like roulette. One more turn, you know, always one more.
It wouldn't be that way with me. I swear it wouldn't. I'd take only what I set out to get. Even if there's still $500,000 worth lying around waiting to be picked up.
We ought to put some kind of a limit on our take. Agree between ourselves, and when we get so much, we'll just pull up stakes and beat it.
What do you think the limit ought to be?
Oh, say $25,000 worth apiece.
25,000, small potatoes.
How much do you say?
Oh, 50,000 anyway. 75 would be more like it.
That'd take a year.
It wouldn't be that way with me.
This is where we can for certain ascertain that Dobbs has been influenced by the gold, as Howard said typically happens during prospecting. To further support this, Curtin says that they shouldn't make hogs of themselves and settle for $25,000, as it's much more than he thought he'd ever get out of it. Being called a hog angers Dobbs, and this is where he brings up that he should get a larger cut of the share than Curtin, as he footed his bill with the $100 he won from the lottery ticket. This is despite the fact that he said it wasn't a problem earlier.
Well, would you like to shake the hand that bought that ticket?
Congratulations.
Congratulations yourself. You stand a profit out of this the same as I do.
How do you make that out?
Well, didn't he just say we needed $600? Well, that's what we got now, ain't it?
Yeah, but...
But what?
Well, how come you're putting up for me?
Well, this is an all-or-nothing proposition, ain't it? If we make a find, we'll be lighting our cigars with $100 bills. If we don't, the difference between what you put up and what I put up ain't enough to keep me from being right back where I was this afternoon, polishing a bench with the seat of my pants.
Curtin pays him back, with interest, but Dobbs throws the gold away and blames his threatening attitude on the fact that he got called a hog. At this point, Dobbs is starting to lose it. The next day, he's found talking to himself about how they shouldn't touch his stuff if they know what's good for them. He's also been tasked with resupplying their camp, which is a 2-day-long venture. Howard goes to check on Dobbs, and after a short while, Dobbs accuses him and Curtin of giving him the resupply duty so that the two of them have time to find his gold and then run away with it. Howard tells him to forget about it and later gives the job to Curtin. Before Curtin can resupply their camp, he notices a Gila monster, a poisonous lizard with a relentless bite, and another example of English having spelling that makes no sense whatsoever to how you actually pronounce it. He's going to shoot it, but before he gets the chance, the Gila monster hides beneath a rock. Curtin is about to flip it over as Dobbs arrives, holding Curtin at gunpoint, and exclaims that he knew this would happen, that Curtin and Howard are actually working together to steal his gold. Curtin quickly puts the pieces together that Dobbs hid his gold beneath the rock that the Gila monster is under. As Curtin explains the situation to Dobbs, Howard comes to see what the commotion is about. Curtin, angered by Dobbs' behavior, tells him to go ahead and grab his goods out from under the rock. It shouldn't be an issue if there's no Gila monster underneath, but Dobbs hesitates. There's two reasons I can think of as to why he hesitates. The first being that at this point he still trusts Curtin. After all, Curtin did save his life when the mine collapsed. So despite the fact that Dobbs has been actively stating that the other two are conspiring against him, he can't fully let go of the idea that what Curtin says is true. If the Gila monster bites him out here, he is almost certainly going to die. Another way to view this is that he doesn't trust Curtin, but his overall display of paranoia is getting the better of him. While he doesn't believe what Curtin is saying, Dobbs is more concerned with the possibility of a Gila monster hiding under the rock. This concern is separate from what Dobbs perceives to be Curtin's true intention, stealing his gold. Maybe after all he actually doesn't believe that there's a Gila monster under there, but that he'll be shot once he pulls out his share of the gold, as the other two now have confirmed that his stash is underneath the rock. Regardless of what's actually going on in Dobbs' mind, he lashes out at Curtin as he's egging him on to put his hand in or he'll be considered a coward. Howard and Curtin manage to take Dobbs' gun away and flip the rock over, showing to Dobbs that Curtin was right all along. Curtin is still the one that goes on the resupply mission, and there another American takes an interest in him. Curtin plays dumb and says he's hunting for hides, but the American follows him to their camp. The American is named Cody, and he immediately sees through their act as he's there for the same reason as them, to dig for gold. As he sees it, they have three different options to choose from. 1. Kill him, but if they do so, they have to ask how far they'll be willing to take such a measure to. First, it starts with him. Then someone else might come along and they have to kill them. And then maybe dozens more will come along after that. Are they ready to kill that many? 2. Cody reports him to the authorities as they're digging for gold without a permit. If he does, he'll get 25% of all of their current earnings. He says these options first to make number 3 much more tempting. He asks for them to take him in as a partner, and on top of that, he won't take anything that they have gathered so far, but only wants to share from the profits to come. He leaves the others to let them discuss the matter in private. This conversation is very important as we can see the influence the gold has had on the three of them. Dobbs is immediately hostile and wants to kill Cody off. It's not so surprising as he punched him square in the face earlier for taking a little bit of water to make coffee. Howard is reluctant to the idea as he doesn't want to kill him, and he doesn't mind being a bit taken advantage of as he won't have to share what he's made so far. Dobbs argues that other guys might come along and then they have to share their future profits with them too. Howard agrees that it's a fine point but is still reluctant to do it. He says that they should let the majority vote decide and gives the final say to Curtin. Given how Curtin has behaved so far, I think it's fair to say that Howard believes that Curtin won't vote to kill Cody. You can clearly see how conflicted Curtin is from his body language as he anxiously rubs his arm, but after contemplating on the matter, he votes in favor of the idea to kill Cody. And this is why this scene is of great importance. We clearly see how gold has affected Dobbs as he can go so far as to kill another human being without a second thought. Meanwhile, Howard's trying to avoid it. He's seen gold plenty of times and is more resilient to its effect. But even for an all-around good person like Curtin, the inherent greed that gold brings out pushes even him to do something that he actually doesn't want to do. So while he is not as far gone as Dobbs, this currently demonstrates that, given enough time, Curtin will begin to act the same way as him. As the gang goes to kill Cody, he spots bandits in the distance coming their way. Needless to say, they spare Cody for the time being as they need every man they can get to fight them off. After a short confrontation, the bandits are chased away by the Federales, who were pursuing them from far in the distance, but Cody is killed in the shootout. They look through his belongings where they find a letter from Cody's wife.
Your letter just arrived. It was such a relief to get word after so many months of
Silence.
silence. I realize, of course, that there aren't any mailboxes that you can drop a letter in
Out there.
in the wild. Cuba.
But that doesn't keep me from worrying about you. Little Jimmy is fine, but he misses his daddy almost as much as I do. He keeps asking, when's Daddy coming home? You say if you do not make a real find this time, you'll never go again. I cannot begin to tell you how my heart rejoices at those words if you really mean them. Now I feel free to tell you I've never thought any material treasure, no matter how great, is worth the pain of these long separations. The country is especially lovely this year. It's been a perfect spring, warm rains and hardly any frost. The fruit trees are all in bloom. The upper orchard looks aflame and the lower like after a snowstorm. Everybody looks forward to big crops. I do hope you are back for the harvest. Of course, I'm hoping that you will at last strike it rich. It is high time for luck to start smiling upon you. But just in case she doesn't, remember, we've already found life's real treasure. Forever yours, Helen.
The subtle part of this scene is when Curtin takes a short pause upon reading the line, quote, "It's high time for luck to start smiling upon you," end quote. This moment is a wake-up call for Curtin as he realizes the weight of his vote. Cody wasn't a man who was seeking to take their gold. He was a man with loved ones who believed in him and wished him well. This line, and the letter as a whole, is written with the sincerest thoughts, which is a stark contrast to Cody's ultimate fate. This is where Curtin grasps that he would have played a role in dooming a man who was both a husband and a father. Others were eagerly awaiting for him to come back home. He's devastated. All of a sudden, the gold they have amassed seems a lot less valuable than it used to. Time passes, and eventually the gold vein they struck starts to run dry. They manage to get $35,000 apiece after much time and hard work. That same night, Curtin brings up the letter they found on Cody's body. He can't stop thinking about Cody's wife and son, and says that they should give them a fourth of their earnings as if Cody was a partner from the start. Dobbs is completely against the idea. Curtin points out that if it weren't for Cody, they wouldn't have had the firepower to fight off the bandits. In a way, he saved their lives, and Howard agrees. Dobbs is still against the idea and keeps his share while Curtin and Howard are going to give a fourth away. Out of nowhere, a group of Indians appear asking for help as a kid in their village fell into a river. He almost drowned and now won't wake up. Howard offers his help and says to the others that he will be back by tomorrow morning. He does manage to help the child and returns the next day. This is a second and much more important spoiler warning. I'm going to talk about the climax of the movie, so if you like to see it for yourself, consider this a good point to jump off to do so. Alright, so the next day the Indians show up again and will force Howard to come with them if so required to pick back what he did for them. He can't decline as the Indians believe that their ancestors will curse them if they don't repay him. Howard reluctantly leaves his goods with Dobbs and Curtin, who assure him that they will keep them secure until he comes back into town. However, that same night, Dobbs is seeing an opportunity to get even more wealthy. He says to Curtin that Howard is a fool to leave his goods with them and that they should take his things and leave him in the dust while they have the chance. Curtin is appalled by what he hears. He says he can't do such a thing and he wouldn't do it to Dobbs either if he was in Howard's place. I believe that what Curtin says is genuine and that he's triumphed over the influence the gold has over people after Cody's death. Cody set out to get gold and died because of it, leaving his wife and son to fend for themselves. It was greed that effectively killed him. As I mentioned earlier, reading the letter was a reality check for Curtin. He made a tough decision to go along with Dobbs' idea to execute Cody instead of sharing the future profits with him, and reading the letter made him realize how twisted his sense of justice had become. He was about to kill a man with a loving family for his own financial gain, despite the fact that Cody showed no hostility towards them. So at this point, he doesn't care to get more gold. The best he can do in this situation is to protect his and his partner's goods. The conversation continues, and Dobbs unveils that he suspected Curtin of trying to find an opportunity to kill him for a long time now. What Dobbs is actually doing is projecting his own feelings onto the others. He assumes because he wants all the gold for himself that the other two also want that, despite the fact that they've shown no such ill will towards Dobbs. The situation escalates as Dobbs pulls out his gun. Curtin sees an opening and overpowers Dobbs and takes his gun away. He reiterates that he means no harm, and that he will treat Dobbs' goods like he's now treating Howard's. He then empties Dobbs' gun and hands it back as a sign of no ill will. Curtin quickly realizes that if they keep traveling together, this won't work out, so he suggests that he'll head out first thing in the morning. Dobbs' paranoia kicks in again. According to him, he thinks that if Curtin goes ahead, he'll lay an ambush and then kill him. If instead he goes ahead, then Curtin will strike him from behind. Curtin can't make any sense of what he's saying and asks why he wouldn't kill Dobbs here and now if he thinks he'd kill him no matter what he does. Dobbs says it's because he's afraid to shoot him when he's staring him right in the eye. Instead, Dobbs makes a bet.
I'll tell you what. I'll make you a little bet. 3 times 35 is 105. I'll bet you $105,000 you go to sleep before I do.
Next night, Curtin can't stay awake any longer. Dobbs uses the opportunity to hold Curtin at gunpoint and then drags him into the woods and shoots him twice. He doesn't see this as murder, as in his mind he justifies it as self-defense.
You mean you're gonna murder me?
No, brother, not murder. No, you're a mistake. I'm doing this to save my life, that you'd be taken from me the minute I wasn't looking at you.
As Dobbs comes back, his paranoia kicks in, and it's making him question if he really did kill Curtin. He goes back to check but can't find any signs of life. Dobbs comes back again and says to himself that he'll dig a hole for him first thing in the morning, along with this.
Conscience. What a thing. If you believe you got a conscience, it'll pester you to death. But if you don't believe you got one, what can it do to you? Makes me sick, all this talking and fussing about nonsense.
I'd argue this scene is the most important in the whole film, so let's take a deeper look at it. Dobbs' main concern is that having a conscience is only a hindrance and a harmful one at that. As we know, having a conscience means that you feel guilty by doing what you consider to be immoral or bad things you are responsible for. When Dobbs says, quote, if you believe you got a conscience, it'll pester you to death, end quote, he's referring to what he just did. In his mind, he killed Curtin under the pretext of self-defense, but deep down he knows that's not true. However, as he says right afterwards, quote, but if you don't believe you got one, what can he do to you? End quote. He says this as a justification for what he just did. If he doesn't have a conscience, no sense of guilt for going against what he has deemed to be immoral, he can do whatever he wants that benefits himself while being justified to do so in his own mind. The next line, quote, makes me sick, so much talking and fussing about nonsense, end quote, refers to what he wanted to do under several different occasions. The most recent examples being that he wanted to kill Cody, steal Howard's gold, and now that he shot Curtin. He deems his ideas to be the best ones, and when the others have argued against him, their opposing ideas are nothing more than nonsense to Dobbs. At last, the scene transitions by going up in flames. I believe this is meant to represent that the last shred of humanity that Dobbs has left is burnt away. He is now so far gone that he can no longer be considered human, as he's giving up what makes him unique compared to many other animals. Our conscience. Ultimately, this is what greed will lead to when left to its own devices. It slowly strips a person of their humanity and sense of wrongdoing. There is more to the film, but I feel I do it a great disservice if I reveal the ending. The treasure of the Sierra Madre isn't shy to twist and turn in ways that were unconventional for films made in the 1940s, such as slowly shifting the role of characters over time, regardless of where they started out. This shift is the most apparent with Dobbs, as his role in the movie changes as greed takes more hold of him. At the start of the film, he's our de facto protagonist, as he's the first character we see on screen. His actions of begging for money might not seem like something bad at this point, as the only context we have is that he's broke and desperate. That he begs to the same man over and over, even when he tries to trick him, makes sense for the situation he is in. As I stated earlier, he also shows signs of being a good person, sharing his cigarettes with Curtin, trying to make sure that he and the other workers gets what they're owed, that he doesn't take more than he is owed after his fight with McCormick, and that he's willing to foot the bill for Curtin's missing money for the expedition funds. This is all well and good until they reach the mountain, where Dobbs slowly shifts into being the antagonist. He becomes increasingly more aggressive towards Curtin and Howard, on top of growing paranoid that they are out to get him for his gold. Despite Curtin saving his life from the collapsing mine, he's still ready to shoot him when he thinks Curtin is about to steal his gold. When Cody enters the picture, he's the first one to bring up option 1 of killing Cody, as he doesn't want to share his gold with someone else. Then he wants to steal from Howard, as he was forced to leave his gold in their hands, and finally he completely loses it and shoots Curtin, the man who has been with him from the start. The man that relentlessly tries to compromise every chance he gets. The man that saved Dobbs' life. He shoots in cold blood. All this from the unfounded notion that the same man was going to kill him and take his gold. This is what I mean with that greed completely changes Dobbs. All of his actions are around protecting his gold, and all roads in his mind lead to someone or other being out to take his gold for themselves. He no longer sees others as humans, but as obstacles in his way that must be dealt with. I find this subtle character shift from being the protagonist to the main antagonist quite breathtaking for a movie that was made back in 1948. Even today, I don't feel that you see this very often. It's still hard to pull off correctly. Given all I just said, I hope you can see why I'm hesitant to reveal the ending. It can go any number of directions as the film doesn't shy away from doing the unexpected, and thus it's best to experience it for oneself. The main goal of this analysis was to see how the inherent greed that riches, such as gold, brings is able to corrupt a person, and I feel I made that point clear. I do have one more point to make though, and that's something I noticed for the first time during this more analytical rewatch of the movie. There's a clear socialist lens of the events that unfolds, and after doing some research, that's not all that surprising, as the author of the book the movie's based on, going by the pen name B. Traven, was a socialist. His pen name first appeared in the newspaper Forward, which was owned by the Social Democratic Party of Germany. Then we have the fact that the title of his first book was called Der Wobbly, which was a common name for members of the Industrial Workers of the World Trade Union. This trade union's philosophy and tactics are described as, quote, revolutionary industrial unionism, end quote, and have ties to socialist, syndicalist, and anarchist labor movements. Given these facts, the treasure of the Sierra Madre was a way for B. Traven to critique capitalism. This is shown at the start as Dobbs begs for money. There's a clear struggle in this town, as some has a lot of wealth and others being broken on the streets. Dobbs has to rely on the charity of those wealthy people to make ends meet. But once they realize that he won't be any use to them, and that he only reduce their profits, they make him go away. Another argument for this socialist take is when Howard explains the value of gold. He explains it like this.
Say, answer me this, will you? Why is gold worth some 20 bucks an ounce?
I don't know, because it's scarce.
1,000 men say go searching for gold. After 6 months, one of them's lucky. 1 out of the 1,000. His find represents not only his own labor, but that of 999 others to boot. That's 6,000 months or 500 years, scrabbling over mountains, going hungry and thirsty. An ounce of gold, mister, is worth what it is because of the human labor that went into the finding and the getting of it.
Never thought of it just like that.
Well, there's no other explanation, mister. Gold itself ain't good for nothing except for making jewelry with gold teeth.
What he's explaining here is the labor theory of value that Karl Marx expanded upon. In Howard's example, gold is expensive because of the sheer amount of labor that's needed to find it, and not of the gold itself. That one person who found gold is riding on the back of the misfortune of another 999 people for their own financial gain. That is to say that, in a sense, it's the 1% exploiting the workers to get richer. The socialist message continues when Dobbs and Curtin work under McCormick. McCormick is the capitalist in this scenario that exploits workers for his own gain. He quite literally makes them work 16 to 18 hours a day with only promises of getting paid. And to keep an additional carrot in front of them to work even harder, they get a bonus if they finish in a set amount of time. Then he just simply runs off, getting all of the benefits for himself and leaving nothing to his workers. The only way the workers are able to get what they are owed is to unite and overthrow the system, which is what the bar fight is meant to represent. Even something as simple as when the three are trying to gather the money they need for their expedition, they distribute the wealth equally. The ones who have more pay more, and the ones who have less pay less. From there, it shifts to how the endless pursuit of profits is able to corrupt us. Dobbs is the most clear offender as he grows paranoid that his profits are going to be taken away from him, and he actively schemes to steal the gold from the other two. It's possible Dobbs' character is meant to show the effect that an abusive, profit-oriented system has on people, as it could be argued that he's only this paranoid as McCormick tried to run away with his money. After all, McCormick had a friendly facade up until it disappeared. What's to say that Curtin and Howard won't do the same thing? Curtin also shows the effect the pursuit of profits have on him. He almost decides to lead Dobbs to die, and later he actively decides that they should kill a man so he doesn't have to share his future wealth with someone else. When Curtin later realizes that the well-being of those around him is more important than pursuing money, Dobbs takes full advantage of this. He is exploiting the fact that Curtin doesn't want to go the extra mile and stop the corruption in front of him. He always tries to alleviate the situation with arguments rather than actions. Dobbs is the opposite and puts his plan into motion, which ultimately gets Curtin shot. He exploits the fact that he can go places and do things that Curtin can't. The one exception is Howard. He's seen firsthand what gold can do to people, and is much more altruistic than the other two because of it. He is the first one to voice his opinion to let Cody join their group, and later upon hearing that a kid is falling into a coma, he comes with them to try and help. Having shown the film's socialist ties, an interesting bit of historical context is that this film was released during the Second Red Scare that gripped the US following the Second World War. During this time, there was a heightened paranoia about communism that would affect films with socialist leanings. One such example is Salt of the Earth from 1954, a film about Mexican-American miners fighting for better working conditions. It was banned from most theaters due to its strong socialist message. It sounds a bit similar, doesn't it? Of course, in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, we're talking about American miners living in Mexico fighting for better living standards. A bit different, but still pretty close. I think why The Treasure of the Sierra Madre didn't face backlash from its socialist origins is due to how it frames the overarching plot to be about the effects that greed has on an individual. There's also the fact that the reason why the gang sets out to find gold can be seen as an analogy for the American dream. They start with nothing, but through hard work they manage to find riches. Of course, as we know, it turns out for the worse, but still, without knowing the source material's author and scrutinizing the character's actions from a socialist point of view, it's relatively easy to miss and can instead be perceived as pro-American, and a cautionary tale at the same time. To conclude, we have now seen that in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, John Huston masterfully portrays the extent humans are willing to go because of greed and lack of morality. In a sense, it's a cautionary tale of what would happen to anyone in similar circumstances and is as relevant today as it was back when it was released in 1948. That there's a protagonist-turn-antagonist arc present in the film with Dobbs is breathtaking for the time the film came out, and offers us an unsettling reflection on how greed can twist and corrupt someone's way of thinking and their relationships when left unchecked. Through its thought-provoking narrative, the film displays the corrupting influence of gold and the distrust and paranoia that comes from it, all while contrasting it with the triumphing moments where our conscience is able to resist the temptation and make us reflect on the dark paths that we were going down. In the film, there's also an underlying critique from a socialist lens due to its source material and its author. This is shown through Dobbs' descent into selfishness and the abandonment of his conscience for monetary gain. There's also Howard's reflections on labor and the value that comes not from gold's scarcity, but the amount of workers needed to find it. Lastly, it reflects the power struggle between workers and employers as seen through how McCormick is able to abuse his workers and not giving them what they are owed. However, whether the film is viewed as a thrilling character study or a broader commentary on the innate problems of capitalism, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre will forever remain as a classic in the realm of cinema. It's a somewhat early example of how films are able to give new life to questions surrounding the human condition and the dangers of letting our instincts take control of us instead of viewing our actions through a sense of reason. My name's Alexander, and thank you so much for watching all the way through. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to hear my opinions of other movies or other media such as games. As this is something new I'm doing, I'd love to hear your thoughts of how I approach analyzing a film and if I could improve it in some way. But for now, I'll see you next time.